Before we start off, let me just ask you guys a question. Have you ever visited a place for not just what it offers, but also the ambience that it creates? Yes, I have done that several times. So you might be guessing, what is she gonna do? What's this hook step about? Yes, maybe that ambience is that captures us, the breathtaking view, the charm it offers, and also the perfect moment to capture our memories. With that hint, you might have guessed the guest for today. Yes, she is the architect, the principal architect of Camilco Pereira Architects, and she is the founder of it. But her journey is what it's very inspiring. She's not only an architect, she's a cancer survivor, a resilient leader, and an entrepreneur, and an inspiration to countless individuals who have made a remarkable journey in her field. Yes, with that, her strength, her perseverance, her purpose is what it inspires us. So please join me in welcoming architect Camilco Pereira onto the show of episode 2 of Be Positive by Brew. Okay, so welcome, ma'am, to this show. How do you feel? How did you?
I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for extending the invitation. So I hope now I'm episode 2. I really hope you
Yes,
continue to do this and enjoy the process of this whole thing that you're. Um, what is it to you? What do you want to achieve through getting people to come on board and speak to us?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the motive of this podcast is not just a podcast.
Yeah.
We're planning to expand this in future.
Yeah.
Like, I would like to expand it as a public speaking platform for like youngsters and elders. So it's a quality that people should develop nowadays.
Yeah.
So I prefer to expand it on a large scale.
So all the best to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, without further ado, let's move on to the questions. So let me just ask you, like your Instagram profile, your portfolio on LinkedIn, it's very superb and eye-catching. So is architecture a love at first sight for you, or like something that you're passionate about from your childhood, or like within what you wanted to develop further?
I think architecture was something that was channeled or directed to me at a juncture, I would say when I was 16. And I have a little backstory. About a month ago when I was in Nuwara, I was randomly getting off a vehicle to eat somewhere. And there was a lady in the adjoining vehicle and she said, Camilca. And I said, instantly I didn't recognize her. I was quite embarrassed at that. And then she said, no sooner she started talking, I was like, oh, my elocution teacher from when I was 14 years old. And then one of the first things she told me was after, the whole hug and kisses, what did you become? Did you become an architect? And I was so thrilled to have somebody who remembers me from a time when I was still a teenager. And they remember that I wanted to do architecture. And then I was so happy to be telling her, yes, I did. I went to university. I now have my own practice. So that was just a little indication of, I don't remember as a 14-year-old wanting to become an architect. I pursued art from when I was a kid. And it was my art teacher who actually told my parents that I was very patient in the mediums that I chose, like ink work and time-consuming work, and channeled me to the possibility of pursuing architecture when I was about 12 or 13. Then to have this, a random meetup with my childhood teacher who remembers me from 14 years that I wanted to become an architect.
It's a goosebumps moment.
I know, it really was. And it's also a very humbling moment. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't love at first sight. It was purely also luck. And I think my stars aligned to have these right people to direct me towards a profession that I later began to love and excel in.
Great. That's an absolute goosebumps moment. Like imagine you manifested something in your childhood and you're driving that glimpse of your life at the moment. It's super special and it's a cinematic move, I guess.
It was. It was.
So architecture is one of the few professions where people literally live in creativity. Once you create something and you deliver it to the world, of course, there will be a lot of positive feedbacks like the Google reviews and everything. Let's say you're creating a cafe and you'll be getting a lot of feedback. it can be positive and negative. So how do you handle both the feedback? Like, do you go extreme when you hear the positive feedbacks, and do you feel like so small when you hear the negative feedbacks?
I think criticism now where I am professionally is different to criticism how I dealt with it when I was a much younger architect in the field. So it's layered and it has sort of grown over time. An incident when my very first big project was Caramel Pumpkin on what it's still there. It's a cafe, and a fellow architect visited soon after and wrote this scathing review. You pour yourself into a space, and this being the first big project that I handled alone, I took it very personally in the sense I didn't do anything about it. I was very upset. I remember reading it. I remember talking to my friends about it. Eventually, I think the word got to that architect and it was removed. But now, I take criticism in layers. Some are very, very valuable. I try not to be egoistic about it because a space doesn't belong to me once I've handed over.
Great.
And a space is something that is innately personal. How I perceive a space is how it can be different to how you would perceive a space, right? So we are human beings. We're like sponges. Sometimes even the most beautiful space, if you walk into it after like a devastating loss, can feel different to you. So I try not to be attached to it personally. So now I handle criticism. Yeah, if I take it as valuable lessons. But as of lately, I haven't really dealt with negative criticism. So yes, so as you mature, I think it's very different how you handle and detach yourself from taking it personally.
Great. So, ma'am, I just want to relate an incident while I was talking to ma'am, like over the call. I was trying to connect with her to be the second guest for the podcast. When I was talking to you about your journey, and like I asked you several questions. So, you're the designer of Punchi's Cafe, and you're the designer of like a well-known department at City of Dreams and all. You just kept yourself so grounded, and it's like, yeah, it's me. Okay, yeah, it's me. I'm with that. You were like so grounded. So, I believe that the more height you reach, the more grounded you become, right?
It's yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I don't think I have been brought up to be egoistic. My parents worked really hard. They're hardworking people.
Yeah.
Privileges didn't just fall from the sky. We had to work really hard towards it. So upbringing like that, I do think kind of shapes and molds you and grounds you in a way because you know what it's like to really work hard, bite the bullet, and strive towards your achievements. So yeah, I didn't really think of it, but okay, I'm glad that I come across as humble. I take that as a massive compliment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yes, it's pressure is privilege. What you want to say?
Yes.
Pressure is privilege.
definitely.
Okay. Nowadays, every field that we step into, whether it's IT, whether it's science, whether it's architecture, whatever field we step into, it's the technology what influences the most. So, especially in technology, AI. Everywhere you go, you just hear the word AI, AI, AI. So, what do you think in the field of architecture? Does AI will replace the human intelligence and anything in the future?
I think AI has, in many ways, even now as we speak, taken up spaces of our profession in terms of optimization, image, generation to various things. So I would like to think that you should embrace AI rather than fear it. So the future architect should be somebody that kind of embraces it rather than fear it. But having said that, people think that, by the way, we have lots of clients also who thinks, a general population think just because you have AI that is doing amazing things, architecture to me is not something, it's just not form creation. It is not, you draw a space or you generate an image, and that is not architecture. A lot of clients seem to believe that just because you prompt and give the right commands to the AI tool, be it ChatGPT or Claude, the space that they generate, yes, can be visually pleasing. But to me personally, I think architecture or design, creative form extends far beyond, because creativity comes from and is generated from your social experiences, cultural intuitions, how you grow up as a child, your traumas, your achievements. So it's a more intuitive, humane, and human process. And data driven analysis can't quite come there. Like, for example, you can you can generate this, but you can't, a data driven analysis can't generate how a space or a child would feel walking along there. Those are things that intuition brings to architecture, the human quality. So that, I'd like to think, cannot be replaced by a data driven realm. But definitely the world is a lot more AI generated. So you need to find that perfect balance. Perfect balance.
Okay. So what you're telling is that architecture is basically an emotion. So you
Yeah.
convey it in a way that it brings a space life.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
It is. I do believe that it is human emotion, and we do. I saw this. There was this. I can't remember the person's name, but a delivery of a speech at a convocation of in architecture students, where the dean of that faculty, I believe that was in the US somewhere, says that, he jokingly says, "Oh, you're almost like, no offense to brain surgeons. Now, I don't want the medical faculties coming at me for this, but in a fun way, in the speech, it says, you are essentially doing brain surgery, but without having a patient, on a bed. You are changing the brain and how it's wired across a space. By creating a space, you can change the emotion of a person,
Change the mood of it.
change the
you
mood.
come in and you swap
Exactly. And that is brain surgery of sort, right?
Yes.
You change how
Without
your
surgical
brain-
equipment.
Yes. So I thought it was such a funny delivery and such an apt delivery. The audience was laughing.
Okay, so I have seen that this field is mostly client oriented. So you have to communicate with the client, you have to understand their requirements and all. So I want to know your perspective on a client. Let's say a client gives you full freedom, design whatever you want, put your full creativity to the space. And on the other hand, you have a client who's very particular in what they want. So how do you see these two different clients and you move according to the situation?
I've had both of the types that you.
I know, definitely you would.
You've just mentioned, but I think the best projects arise from situations where either party is not in control. It shouldn't be where the architect's fully in control. It shouldn't be where the client is fully in control. For me, in my practice, I don't know about, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, in the practice, the best designs or the projects that I've enjoyed the most comes from a collaboration where the client is able to fully invest emotionally and let us know what they want, and me, my team, where we are able to fully understand and immerse and create the vision, or make their vision come to life. So it's always a collaboration. By saying a client is easy, I think for me what that translates to is the easiest clients are clients that does not give you design freedom, but easiest clients for me are the ones that are very respectful and are respectful towards you and your professional capacity when you walk into a room. So in Sri Lanka, our industry is male dominated. And early on in my practice, I've come across clients who somehow think that or you are, not that they've spoken that in words, but that is the vibe that
Subconsciously in the mind,
subconsciously,
yeah.
right? That you are made to feel small because you're a woman.
Exactly. Yes.
And even now, I'm sure there are people like that, but luckily I've been blessed with, especially these last 2 years, I've been blessed with a really good mix of clients whose work I've enjoyed. So it must always be a collaboration. It shouldn't be a situation where either party is ruling over the other. So mutual respect and collaboration is when a project thrives in how I practice.
Great. So that's such a great
Even in
motive.
relationships, you can't have just one person dictating the terms, right?
Yeah,
The best
true.
relationships, whether it's a marriage or a friendship, it is a collaboration where you need both parties invested in
Yeah, it's
the
always
cause.
bread with butter, right? It's not just butter. You can't have just
Yeah,
butter.
just butter is also good though. Yummy.
Okay, I understood what you are coming to say.
Yeah.
Okay, but still, I would like to ask you which kind of relationship, client relationship lasts long? The one that gives you more requirements and like more specifications, or the one that gives you freedom? Which one you think lasts long?
Again, it goes back to, it stems from the previous answer. The best clients are the ones who respects you professionally.
Yes.
When you walk into the room, they understand that you have come in at a professional capacity, and I am qualified and have the expertise and the knowledge to deliver something. That is why they are, they have come to me, rather than actually making it almost like a transaction. Because I have had clients who are very sweet to you at the beginning, like almost too sweet, where I've kind of taken a step back and think, oh my God, this person is so sweet. But then as time progresses, as the project comes to a completion, you're sometimes seeing the true nature. So they're not actually very sweet. It's just in the beginning.
True, true.
So not, people are very different. We meet clients of all walks of life. So the best clients that have come my way and are there at the moment are the ones that respect me professionally and doesn't treat this whole design situation as something transactional, because it is not. We spend a lot of time with clients, we spend a lot of time speaking to them, understanding them, and even especially when it's a home, it's super personal. We are speaking to their children, we're in and out of their homes, we see them at their finest hour dressed up, and we see them in the midst of chaos running behind their children. So it's a very emotional thing. So mutual respect is super important, where you don't feel like they're taking you for granted.
Great. It's the respect that you have for job. She has the respect for her job, and she expects people to have the respect for her and her passion. So that's pretty much simple, right? So moving on, I would just like to ask you, you carry so much roles, okay? I don't know whether I could be saying this in front of the camera or something. You are a mother, you're a cancer survivor, and you're an entrepreneur, you're a leader. You like deliver your products to people, and you like speak in front of public forums. So you carry so much dimensions within you. So as a woman, I would like to ask you, what's the misconception that society often praises for in a woman that you want to change? Okay, this stereotype could be changed. This perspective could be changed. Do you have any sort of things like that?
I think especially for an Asian woman, a mother, an entrepreneur, and as you said, I have never shied away from saying I'm a cancer survivor. I am, and I'm being very outspoken about it. I think society is made to praise women who self-sacrifice. I remember my mother working, she worked at the airport, she worked for Sri Lankan Airlines for 40 years. So literally I was born into it, and then my mother retired, 40 years later. So I saw her being all of these multifaceted roles where she didn't really think too much of herself. And we praise her for it. We have so many, I'm sure people who were born in the much earlier to you, people were born like in my generation, growing up in the 90s, all our parents were in that strata. Now I think it's important to understand and break the norm where you praise a woman for being what you call who are self-sacrificing, who don't think of themselves, who are always in the act of giving and giving and giving. You call who are self-sacrificing, who don't think of themselves, who are always in the act of giving and giving and giving. So I'd like to think that you can't pour from an empty cup. For you to be able to love and give, you must also find and nurture the you within. Because otherwise, if you're always running on empty, you will at some point detach from yourself. I don't know if it makes sense, but in my head, I'm very, very conscious about the balancing act. There's always a compromise and a sacrifice. In fact, I made a reel about it on my socials on Instagram.
Yeah, I've seen that reel.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to ask you this question.
People really think that you can do it all and be it all, but you can't. I don't have 100 hands. So I therefore trust in the people around me. I have trust in my team. I have trust in the person who looks after my baby who's almost 3, that they will do the work when I'm not there. If I'm in office, I'm not feeding my daughter. If I'm at home doing, I was making Vesak Pudu last week, but then my team was working in the studio. So it's always a balancing act, and I think it's absolutely okay. I think as women, it's so important to understand that you shouldn't overextend yourself and always self-sacrifice. You have to take a step back and understand, okay, you know what, this is too much for me. Take that time, detach yourself, go do something you like. I don't remember my mother enjoying her youth. I remember her working. I don't remember her meeting her friends, going for a movie. If at all, it was with us. So
Yeah.
in that sense, I think it's time, and I think the women right now are breaking that.
They were innocent women.
It's okay to enjoy life. It's
Yeah.
okay to not be always rearing or looking after children. It's okay to take time off. So I think that is what we need to break, especially as women. Especially, it's the older woman who is the first to sort of judge the working mom. Be like questions like, "How are you at the meeting? Who's looking after your baby?" Like I've been asked so many times. But then I wonder, parallelly, has my husband been ever asked that? Oh my God, you're here in office doing a presentation. Who's looking after your girl? I don't think that has ever been asked of a man.
Yes.
Right? So we need to break that. When I have been asked that, I've always been vocal about my mother is there, my mother-in-law is there, and then lately I have a trusted party to look after her. So it's okay,
Great.
right? So you have to look after you also.
True. So whenever I do a podcast or whenever I go on a public forum and talk in front of people, I do a research about people. So my previous guest, she also said the same thing. She said you have to dim one stove to light up the other.
Yeah.
So okay, if you're working on the field, you're working with clients, okay, at that time you have to dim the time for your family.
Yeah.
Then once you're working with the family, once you started enjoying your family time and enjoying that vibe, so you sort of dim that light, right? So it's the balance that we should have. And then when it comes to, you said that about some questions aren't asked to your husband, but they're asked to me. Nowadays, I think the men of this generation also understands the value.
Yeah, for sure.
So they
Yes.
understand the time that they should give to their woman. They understand the time that she also needs the space that I needs. She also needs the time with her family, with her friends. So I think the generation is evolving a bit, and they sort of understand our expectation and we also have dreams and to achieve. So nowadays the change is very drastic, and in a good way it's very improving. So I'm happy about that. Moving on to the next question, we have a segment called Audience Choice Segment. So that's where we pick two questions. You pick the two questions which were asked by our audience to answer. So now we're moving on to that segment. So The first question is, okay, since I don't know whether I should be able to ask this question. I'm also like a fresh graduate. I will be graduating soon. So there are people who are asking about the internships that you give in a firm. So what are the qualifications that you expect in a fresher? Obviously, you can't expect a fresher to build like a Punchi's cafe or like a Cinnamon Grand building. So like, what is the qualification that you expect in a fresher? Whether it's in terms of technical or like professional or like their core soft skills. What is the qualifications?
For me, I think two things. So you can train somebody to draft. You can train somebody to hand draft. You can train somebody in AutoCAD. So all of the skill sets are things that you can potentially over a period of time train. So when a student comes, I don't just look at how skilled you are, because you can be trained. Anyone can be trained, in my opinion. If you commit to it, anybody can be trained. What I look for mostly is a human side of it, because mine's a very, very small studio. So I spend a lot of time understanding who they are as a human being. So I now write tomorrow, this week actually, there's a CVs are called, and there is a process of looking at the CVs where I first look at the skill set. And I've always said I want straight A students, because I was one. Funnily enough, the portfolios that has come have been quite good. So the first stage of that is to understand how good a portfolio is, and you look at their technical skills. And then comes the second part, where I call them or I text them, kind of have a conversation going, and then there's a physical meeting. And then there's a trial period, and then only you decide whether or not, on board or not. So it's a lot of time that I invest in trying to understand something that is beyond your CV. So one of the most things that I admire in a person is the ability to learn. The curiosity is something that you can't quite train someone to have, whether it's an interior design student or an architecture student or a drafting person. You can't give those skills. Those skills you're born with, or that is who you are as part of your personality. So the curiosity to learn, and to be humble, to be able to work with different people in the team. So those are the things that I slowly check in, through conversation and emails, in how they type an email, how courteous they are they punctual? So all of these.
So at this point, I want to highlight, guys, don't just use ChatGPT email, okay?
Please don't, because I hate
So your email
ChatGPT driven. The first bit, everything reads the same right now. Again, I made a reel. I was like, oh my god, just write. It's okay that your English is not good. At least that it tells me that.
Last week I saw an email that it says, like, in ChatGPT in brackets it will give like, put your name, enter your name. They didn't even change that. They just copy pasted that, and
so that's quite terrible, because that instantly tells me, or somebody who may be your future employer, that you are a little bit lazy to even double check the mistakes, b that you have no voice of your own, right? It's such an individualistic thing to be applying for a job, and this job should feel important to you. So definitely skills can be trained. I'm looking for most to do with what kind of a human being you are, with this really passion driven curiosity to learn.
So it's not just the step you take, it's how you value the step, how you invest your time in that step. And plus, it's not the technical skill, it's about you. It's how you present yourself, it's how you sell yourself, it's how you interpret yourself to others, is what is impressive and what gets the person to look at you. So that's an absolute I would say, eye-catching or like a stunning moment that would be grabbing our attention as students who are going to be stepping into the industry. So thank you, ma'am, for sharing that like on a public forum. So what's the fastest way that a client could make you say yes?
When you feel valued. I think it's
Yeah.
the opposite of that also.
Respect.
Yeah,
Not the
because I
opposite.
think I said that in a previous answer. Mutual respect to me goes a long way. And where the studio is right now, I've worked really, really hard to be where I am in terms of where the studio is. And the last 2 years professionally, I've been able to say yes and no to certain clients where I'm now in the practice of picking the projects we want to take. So
Isn't it hard to say no?
I think, no, not really. I think as you mature, you are better able to. Let me put it this way: when I first started, I said yes to every project that came my way because my priority was to hone my skill set, build a portfolio, and have projects under my belt, right? And so my priority was different. My priority from 10 years ago to now has shifted. So now I pick and choose the projects we take on. So sometimes when you speak to the client, because as I said, if I'm investing so much time in picking the right person for the team, you can guarantee that I spend a lot of time speaking to the potential clients that we will be working with. Whether it's through a series of messages, then series of phone calls, you are able to pick certain red flags. And most of those red flags to me is when you don't have mutual respect on board. And now I don't shy away because my mental peace and the mental well-being of my studio matters to me. So I just, have said goodbye to certain projects, although it would have, we would have made a lot of money through them. And that's okay. I think you're not everyone's cup of tea, and that's how life is also. So, yeah, so red flag is when there is no respect.
Great. It's just when you enter into certain field, you enter as a scared puppy, right? Like obviously with the society and then the situations that you face, that changes you, right? In perspective of what you look and how you look at a person. Initially, when people are like so nice to you, you would look at them like, oh wow, these people are so nice to me. How could they be this nice? And then once you, as you said earlier, once you start evolving, you might understand those people are the ones that you should save yourself from. So yes, it's the respect and then the character of a person is what matters. So the last question for this session today is, how do you normally handle project scope changes, timeline delays, and payment related disagreements? Obviously, you would be having those type of stuff like on a regular basis, I would say, right? So like, how do you handle them?
I think communicating and not being in gray areas is super important in any business. Architecture is not.
So it's either black or white.
Yes, and sometimes gray too. So what you want to minimize from a business point of view, whether it's architecture or anything, is that you have to have really good documents. You have to have a very clearly planned out fee letter that shows the client, okay, these are the steps that this person will go through with you in the design process, and these are the applicable charges. So actually, one of at Green University, when I delivered, I did a student session. Your roommate's batch.
She's right there.
It was you. Oh, right. So one of the questions after the session has ended, a group of students came and asked me, how do we charge or how do we have a fee letter? So those are things that the fee letter that I sent 10 years ago is not the fee letter that I do now, right? These are things that I have learned, certain clauses I have put because of certain experiences. But you must respect the time that you bring to the table. So I told the students, charge something, be it even for the transport or the time that you spend at site. Charge something, start small. Don't be over ambitious where you throw big numbers, especially when you're a student. You're doing this as a side hustle to earn extra pocket money. So things evolve and change as you mature. But I think now in my practice, it is the art of communication and being very, very thorough and clear about what your terms and conditions are, so that you don't necessarily get into these odd situations. But having said that, I must say, Sri Lanka in the creative industry, I don't know if it's an Asian thing or even just a Colombo City thing, we don't get paid on time. It's a terrible place to be in.
It's
Even now,
paperwork and proper work should be there in order to mark.
even
but that,
even with certain policies in place, uh, innately people in Sri Lanka in the design, and I know this is not just something that is special to me. I have my colleagues telling me the same thing. People just don't pay on time. You send them a fee reminder. Some, we have waited sometimes in 2023 after completing a project. The last payment came 9 months later, and various excuses, which is not acceptable. You don't go to a store and buy something and not pay. So the same simple transaction happens in the creative industry too. It's applicable to us human beings. You need to pay, especially smaller startups like mine. A payment means a rent on the other end, a salary on the other end, because we don't have huge reserves, right? So I'm blessed to have had really good paying clients, but I have had, I'm sure they do see, memories will click.
please, yeah.
Memories will click, and I hope you pay better next time, because you should. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Like we should get like acknowledged, I would say, for the work that we do, right? Like you deliver something in your best quality and you don't receive the outcome of it in the way that you should. It's
Yeah.
just disappointing, I would say.
It is. So, I hope that
Yeah.
Colombo as a whole or country as a whole are better in terms of
I hope
payment,
people
but,
understand.
yeah, for sure.
Yes, ma'am. It was a great privilege having you on our show. And once again, thank you so much to
You're welcome.
accept and come to the show. Okay, like just we are like stepping on to our journey ahead, and then like whether it's Niveta ma'am or you, like you somehow decided to show up. So like, what's that feature that wanted you to show up for this? Even though I'm like, this is my second episode, I approached you, and okay, you went through my work and all, but you still accepted to do it. What made you accept that?
I think to understand that the way you spoke, the way you were following up, that's why I said, like, I've seen, I am hardworking, so I know when I see somebody hardworking. So I think it's important, and and it came the second day, I think, the day after the NSBM
Yes.
session, you approached me, and
So
I
once
loved,
you conducted the session at
Yeah.
NSPM, like we as actually roommates, we would like at the end of the day we would come back from uni and discuss a lot of things.
Yeah.
So and that day she was telling me about you. We were
Yeah.
having dinner and she was telling me about you. And I asked her, why can't I call her as the second guest? And she's like, yeah, because not only by profession she's a great person, but as a human being she's also so great. So you should call her. So that's how it started. I went through your LinkedIn profile and all later. Yeah, you may continue.
Yeah. So I think, I obviously want people to do well in whatever industry, whether it's your roommate behind the camera or you. And if somebody were to extend kindness and thoughtfulness, I think you remember that for all your life, right? So I didn't come here because I'm feeling sorry for you. It's not that. But you see somebody, you kind of, it takes one to know one. If you're hardworking, you will see and are able to attract that kind of people. So it doesn't matter that you are very early in the beginning of your podcast journey with your friend. As I said right in the start, I hope you do well. But I think it's, when you do something with good intentions, people do remember. Also, who knows? Maybe I can come back on the 100th episode
Yeah, sure,
in
sure.
my own studio.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're
It means a
welcome.
lot. It means a lot. Like, it takes a lot for a person to say about a person like this much. Thank you so much,
You're
ma'am.
welcome.
Thank you. You recognized me as a small token of love and appreciation from our
Thank you
side.
so much.
This is for
You
you.
didn't have to, but thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for the time that you guys have invested to watch this video, and you can watch the full episode on our YouTube. And moving on that, you can drop your comments in the comment section below to let's just engage and know what your feedbacks are. Until then, this is me, Brintika Jude Walton, signing off. See you at episode 3. Bye bye.